coming, the sun's zooming in, meltdown expected, the wheat is good there, engines stop running, but I have no fear, 'cause London is drowning. I live by the river.
Hello everybody and welcome to the By the Minute Arsenal podcast. We join you after the international break. What a delight. I'm sure you've been thrilled and excited to get through the international break. It does make it a little more disappointing though when we come back after an international break to Arsenal and then manage to lose to Watford. But we'll come to that in a second. First of all, introductions. I am Matt H. With me is Pete. Hello Pete.
Hello Matt, and I have very much enjoyed listening to you try and do that introduction the last 5 times.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I'm normally perfectly fine at doing the introduction, one take Huggins, as they call me, but for some reason I just couldn't speak today. Perhaps this is a reflection on the performance of the Arsenal team yesterday. Pete, of course...
I think you should include it all in the podcast, because that's a good way to cheer people up.
Not on this occasion. I will keep it. Perhaps if we do some kind of blooper reel or something, when we get to 50 or 100 or something, I can have a stab at doing it then. I can edit it all beautifully then. We have Pete back. Now Pete was away, obviously the international break, but also a couple of weeks before that. So it is like a new signing. I feel obliged to use that comment every now and again in the pod. Glad to have him back. We don't have Matt V this week. He can't make it. We'll have him back, I hope, next week. We do have his predictions, of course, which is the main thing. So we'll have him back next week, hopefully. Right. Well, let's get to it then, because we don't want to dwell on this any longer than we need to. Arsenal played Watford yesterday. We were doing this on a Sunday afternoon just for a change, and they lost 2-1 in a game that managed to be very dull, quite controversial, and extremely disappointing all in one go. Disappointing for Arsenal, that is. I imagine Watford were not so disappointed. Where should we start? Well, let's start with the team news, because I turned on the coverage and saw Robbie Savage being very angry, which amused me, and I'm sure amused any right-thinking person. He was upset, I think, that there was no Ozil in the starting lineup, no Ramsey or Sanchez anywhere to be seen. But I looked at the team and I didn't feel quite as angry as he was about it. Pete, did you have any thoughts on the first 11, or indeed those on the bench?
No, I wasn't angry. I was saddened not to see Aaron Ramsey there, but I think it's pretty understandable. He must be absolutely devastated at the moment. The last thing he must be thinking about is Arsenal Football Club, really. I mean, he must be pretty depressed at Wales's position, and but it was a shame not to see him. But I thought lovely to see Welbeck back on the team sheet. I'm not at all worried about Ozil being on the bench, and Sanchez, I think we've coped pretty well without him in the games he hasn't played recently. So, no, I didn't have that much of a problem. I was reasonably happy that we were going to had a reasonably good starting lineup.
Yeah, personally, I was happy to see Iwobi in there, and it was good to see Mertesacker back in as captain. Okay, some of his performances may have been a bit patchy here and there, but when you look at it, it seems like a perfectly decent defensive replacement given the injury to Mustafi. Yeah,
very much so. The back three and the wing backs all looking really good. Nice to see Kolasinac in there still, and Bellerin in. So yeah, I didn't have a problem with it really. It's the only thing I was a bit sad about was Ramsey, and I think Elneny has done reasonably well in his absence. So I didn't really have any problem at all.
Yeah, I thought he was okay. I tend to agree with you. I thought, yes, you might like to see one of those other names, as it were. And we're not going to talk now about Ozil, Sanchez and their future, because I'm sure we'll have a bit more time to do that in future pods as we get a bit nearer to January and then beyond. But particularly when there isn't really any news about it. But I think Iwobi does a good job whenever he's been asked to. I think he seems to be growing confidence. He, of course, had a completely different international break to Ramsey in that he scored the goal that put Nigeria through to the World Cup. So you hope some of that rubs off and he certainly looked pretty confident and comfortable in his performance. Well, let's get to the game then. I think we can pretty much write off the first 35 minutes because it was one of the dullest half hours or more that I've seen in a football match. Not bad necessarily, just unbelievably dull. Pete, was there anything in there of any value at all?
No, it was really, really boring. But to be honest, I didn't have too much of a problem with that. It was a bit like that in the last at least sort of 2 or 3 league games. Certainly the Brighton one, I remember quite clearly almost falling asleep. it was really dull. And obviously I didn't get the chance to talk about that on the pod, but I wasn't too upset it was dull because, as I say, I mean, we've had some good results from pretty boring performances recently.
We have indeed, and yes, take your point about that, and to illustrate it further, things then looked a little better very shortly afterwards. I would just mention though, this game was Arsenal were 3-0 up at half time in the same fixture last season. We think about the game we lost at home, but actually in the away game we were 3-0 up by half time. So it became clear though that wasn't going to be happening again. So just after that extremely dull period, we had our goal, and it was a goal for Per Mertesacker, his first goal for some time. I can't remember how long, but a long time. Thumping header, great finish.
Yeah, which also made Robbie Savage extremely angry, which was even funnier. Yeah, he was angrier about that than he was at Ozil's absence. He was absolutely fuming that anyone should dare to use zonal marking at a corner, as ever. And very, very upset about it. And for me, it completely took away from the fact that it was a brilliant corner from Xhaka. You can say what you like about poor defending. Yeah, maybe it was poor defending, but it's an absolutely brilliant ball in. And some corners are undefendable, and I personally think that one was. It was a millimetre above whatever their number 27 is called. Head as it dropped right perfectly onto Mertesacker's, and you can moan about no one marking him or Tom Cleverley tracking him, but those sorts of corners, when the ball takes that perfect parabola into the perfect place in the box, there's no defending it.
Yeah, Kabasele, for those who are interested, is the number 27 of Watford who the ball avoided. And then I thought so that was after 39 minutes. On the clock then, and then I thought it was only 5 minutes or so plus a bit of extra left in the first half, but I thought we immediately looked a lot better team, and it raises a point which will actually a wider point which, as subsequent events happened, I didn't know it was going to happen. I made this note at half time, but I noted again the idea of us being a confidence team, and that seemed to prove it, and so did the subsequent events, which we'll come on to. And yeah, any thoughts on that aspect?
On our confidence.
Yeah, on playing, on needing a goal almost to get ourselves going. Might be another way of putting it.
Yeah, and particularly in these kind of boring workman-like performances that we're putting in. As I say, I don't actually have that much of a problem with it, as long as we are doing the hard work, keeping the opposition at bay, and taking the chance when it comes. I don't think that's too bad a thing. And yeah, we look better, and as any team does after scoring. But I don't think the lack of excitement before that was really a problem. I thought we had up until then a pretty decent workmanlike performance. That it was a bit dull, but Watford were awful. So I think we were in a position where we knew we had the game if we wanted it, basically. And it's the other side of things. It's when we lose confidence that's the problem.
Well, let's move on then to the second half, because there was a few incidents there worth noting, although they all happened very close to each other, really. Arsenal started, I thought, quite decently. There was a good chance for a Iwobi, although Watford were looking better. Both defences looked reasonably organised. Then there was the key period after sort of 70-odd minutes when Ozil had come on for an injured Welbeck after the hour. Had a chance to score, didn't take it. Within seconds, the ball's up the other end, and there is, shall we say, a soft penalty given to Watford. Starting with the Ozil miss, I don't like to criticise too much. I thought it was a pretty bad miss. I thought it really wasn't a well taken attempt by Ozil. Any thoughts on that one?
It was awful. The miss, just terrible. He could have done anything, couldn't he? He could have taken it on. He could have just put it anywhere other than where he did. It was appalling. Is it fair to criticise it? Yeah, it is, isn't it? Because anyone can miss. Anyone can miss a very good chance. Iwobi had just missed and not quite as good a chance just shortly beforehand. I don't know. And Ozil had set that chance up for him, but Iwobi had set this one up for him, and it was just incredibly frustrating, wasn't it? Really, that he couldn't take that opportunity to say, right, I'm here, and I am the player you thought I was, and I will put this game to bed. And the fact he didn't, I think, says a lot about his current state of mind.
It's exactly the thing that people who are easily moved to criticise him in general for his, the apparent lack of work rate, all the rest of it, even though some stats sort of show that's not the case. But this is exactly the kind of thing that people can actually grasp onto as a fairly concrete example. Look what he did here. And you're right, anyone can miss, but there was a certain laziness perhaps in the approach or something. It looked that sort of laid back approach, which is great if it comes off, but you just leave yourself open to so much criticism if it doesn't.
Yeah, and when you're coming off the bench in that situation, you should want to prove something, shouldn't you, to the manager who hasn't been playing you for, okay, he's been injured, but yeah, he should have wanted to prove something, and he should have done an awful lot better than he did.
And it really came to hurt Arsenal a few seconds later when the ball was at the other end, and it was Bellerin, wasn't it, got involved with Richarlison, which sounds like two names sort of jammed together. Maybe that's the background to it, I don't know. But who went down, shall we say? I've said a soft penalty. Everyone seemed to be agreed that it wasn't a penalty. Do you have any view that differs from that?
No, it wasn't a penalty.
No, it wasn't a penalty, and even you've got everyone agreeing up. Even whichever referee it was in the box for the commentary, Graham Pole, I think, who quite often referees, understandably, want to sort of defend their colleagues, but there wasn't any defending him on this one. It was just a mild tangle of legs, wasn't it? And down he went.
Yeah, there has been lots of talk about whether it was a dive or not, and I'm not entirely sure. I would say it's going to be interesting to see if this disciplinary panel does look at it, but it's really difficult to say, isn't it, whether people are deliberately diving, and I can't really almost see how you can decide upon that from a piece of video after the event, and to some extent I think it's utterly pointless anyway, because even if you ban the guy for 2 or 3 games, Arsenal have still lost the points.
Yeah, it's one of those things that the idea is that you bring it in and then you try and stop someone doing it the next time. But like all these things, it's too late for the team affected.
If it was a dive, then he's got what he wanted anyway, and to some extent, good luck to him. He may take a punishment for it, but there you go. He's got what he wanted if it was a dive, and if it wasn't, then he might get punished for something that he didn't actually do deliberately. And I've always said about this, when it's happened to Arsenal players been accused of diving. I remember particularly, oh God, I've forgotten the name. Broken leg chap. Eduardo.
Oh, Eduardo, of course.
Remember when Eduardo was accused of diving over a Scottish player?
It was against Celtic, wasn't it? There was a game.
Yeah. It wasn't a dive. It's just trying to get out of the way of something. He was moving at 100 miles an hour and desperately trying to get out of the way of a tackle that would have hurt him badly. And, a man coming back from having broken his leg. And it wasn't a dive. Everyone said what a cheat he was. And it was like, no. And to some extent, I see the Richarlison thing at the same thing. He's moving at a hell of a lick. Yeah. And at that pace, if you get even a tiny knock, it may, maybe not enough to make him throw himself to the floor, but I don't think you can look at that and say that's definitively a dive. I don't think it's a penalty, but there you go.
I tend to agree. I don't think it was a dive, but it's not for us to defend him. What it is for us to do is to look at the penalty. Now, a stat that Matt V, who's not with us today, but I saw on his Twitter last night, Petr Cech has faced 12 penalties for Arsenal, and he's never saved any of them.
No.
And I know Matt has mentioned this in previous conversations. I just thought I'd mention it again here. I mean, Deeney's a decent goal scorer. He knows what he's doing. But and we'll come back to him later because we have some discussion about what he said after the game, which I thought was very interesting. But he didn't make a mistake with the penalty, but Cech wasn't in the right postcode, was he?
No, he hasn't saved one for 6 years, apparently. Or 7 years.
Is it that long? God,
He's
blimey.
7. He saved a penalty for Chelsea or something. I mean, I could score a penalty against him, and to be honest, I could Panenka it and score a penalty.
Well,
It's just as soon as a penalty is awarded against us, why bother? Is becoming my view.
you should just give it like a penalty try in rugby. They should just give the goal. Save the trouble.
Save us all a bit of time.
Well, time we still had on our side at that point. We had sort of thick under 20 minutes to come back, but there was really nothing I can remember. We saw a lot of the ball as expected. Monreal seemed to be the only person. He was our attacking threat, is a note I've made. He had a couple of shots, both in good positions and with the best will in the world. Because I like Monreal, he's not the player you want on the end of it, but at least he was making the effort.
He was, yeah, and I was actually really disappointed in that. I think that for me, that was the most disappointing thing about the whole game. The fact that our reaction to that goal was not to really take it to them and to get the winner ourselves. It was to, meander around in a dazed state, probably of injustice, and not think, right. I know there was a problem here, that by that time, Welbeck was already injured. Giroud was on by this time, and it was probably difficult for that group of players to turn it around, but it was disappointing, the reaction, I thought. I mean, we are the better team. Get out there and show that you're the better team, could you please?
Well, it was
it was really depressing.
It was a very ordinary second half from Arsenal, and summed up beautifully, if any sort of one event can sum it up, by Watford scoring the winner. We were already into injury time, weren't we? I think, or we were pretty much there. Yeah. Tom Cleverley, ball. I mean, the ball just wasn't defended particularly adequately. There were players standing around looking at it. Cleverley went in and rammed it home to make it 2-1 to Watford, and that was that. There wasn't really any time for us to come back, and quite frankly, we could have been playing till now, and I'm not sure there would have been. And I think the problem for me is this is just so typical of the way Arsenal have played for a lot of the last few years, and I'm not going to start a manager discussion now because we can do that another time, but you do wonder about the team in the manager's image, and this is another one of those examples where there's something missing. We'll tell you what we'll do. We'll go straight on to the comments post-match by Troy Deeney. Here's a bit interesting stat for you. I found out his middle name is Matthew, which I didn't know. So there we go. There's an exciting bit of trivia for you. And he
still chooses to be known as Troy.
Apparently so. Troy sounds better than Matthew. I speak from experience. I prefer to be Troy, I think, if it came to it. But there we go. He did not hold back in his comments, and I think what makes them particularly hurtful is they are absolutely right, which I think is the problem.
Think so?
Well, he's. I mean, I won't go through all of them, but the basics was his point was, when you come on against Arsenal don't have the cojones, is the word he used, but they don't have, if you get up there and get in it, you're not as talented as them perhaps, but that you if you get yourself in there and get involved, you've got a good chance of winning.
He didn't actually say that specifically about Arsenal, from what I heard. He was saying, when I come on against the team, I want to see if they're up for it. And
the quotes are a bit of both. There's general stuff, but then he does say, whenever I play against Arsenal, I'll go up and think, let me whack the first one and see who wants it. So that was a very specific Arsenal quote, or Arsenal-related quote. Yes, he does. You're right. He does talk about his own abilities, of which we saw ample evidence yesterday, but there was just those couple of comments that were specifically Arsenal related, if you like.
Well, for me, from what I heard, it was just about Troy Deeney trying to make it all about him, when I don't think it was at all. And I'm not saying that Arsenal shouldn't have been better against him or Watford actually as a whole, but I don't think it was all about Troy Deeney. I couldn't believe there was suggestion. Did he get made man of the match? Anyway, if anything, it seemed to me, because Watford had been appalling up until that point, particularly in the first half, as we said earlier on, and actually the difference which they did make at the point at which Troy Deeney came on, I'll give him that, but they went to a back four. They've been playing a back three and they went to a back four, and I think that's what made the difference for them, not Troy Deeney.
Well, I don't want to focus too much on
I'm the best thing ever, and if you bring me on against Arsenal, I'll win the game for you. No, Troy, you're a pretty talentless lump of something, which I won't use on this podcast. It's not you that won that game. as I say, anyone could have scored that penalty, and Arsenal and pretty much anyone could have caused Arsenal the trouble that you did.
Well, and there's the problem, isn't it? That let's forget not worry about who the opposition are and what they might have said in what context. It's the fact that Arsenal are 1-0 up against a decent, but you would suppose a limited team. Yes, you're away from home, but you haven't gone that far. It's it's a few miles away up the M1, and you're 1-0 up, and then you concede a penalty, dodgy penalty. I don't think anyone would expect that, but you seem to let that affect your whole team. And when it got to 1-1. This is rhetorical as much as anything, but did we really think we were going to go on and win it? I certainly didn't. I didn't necessarily think we were going to lose. I thought it might peter out into a 1-1 draw. But I think yes, there might be stuff to say about the penalty, the opposition, and individual players and systems, but all of which are valid. But I think that the issue here is the bottom line, from our point of view, from the Arsenal side of things, is that it just wasn't good enough.
No,
at all.
We should have made a better fist of it in those last 20 minutes. We should have looked better than we were, but I do think there are mitigating factors. I do think the fact that we'd started with a reduced team anyway, without anyone like Sanchez or Ramsey available, and poor old Welbeck, who has just been great all season whenever he's played. The more he has played, the better he's been. Yes, we've laughed at him about his goal scoring abilities, but he's been brilliant at leading a front three, in effect. And the fact he'd gone off, then Koscielny went. I think there are mitigating factors to say, well, actually, maybe there are reasons that we couldn't take the game to them as much as you'd have hoped we could in those last 20 minutes.
Okay, fair enough. I think it's worth noting.
Sorry to excuse us, but I think that is. I think it is worth noting at least.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right. It's worth noting. Personally, I'm not sure it would have made a significant difference, but it's certainly worth noting. I'll just draw attention that on November the 5th we are away at Man City. I'm just saying that now because I think we need plenty of time to prepare ourselves, because Watford are one thing. Watford, remember, lost. Was it 6-0 to Man City? Now I know it doesn't work not that simply, but I just think we've got to get something done before there. What's frustrating, of course, is we sort of did. It being performed much better against Chelsea not that long ago. So for me, it's a frustration that we end up in this situation. Chelsea, with the greatest respect to Watford, have much better firepower than Watford, and we managed to hold them off, and indeed look the better team for a lot of that game. It's this no consistency at all, which I find immensely frustrating. Well, look, we'll leave that one there for now because we've gone on a bit and we want to get a couple of other things in. A quick note of what else happened in the Premier League. Liverpool and Man United obviously drew 0-0 in a game that was possibly even duller than ours, which is quite a challenge. Man City.
I was going to say that I felt, if anything, that was the most disappointing thing about the Watford game, that we were in a position that one of those two teams playing that day can go fourth after both Manchester United and Liverpool have dropped points. So's Chelsea, and then we go and blow it. I think that's almost the most disappointing thing. Well,
that's it. City beat Stoke 7-2. Palace beat Chelsea. Spurs had a narrow win at home to Bournemouth, and earlier today Everton have drawn at Brighton, and Newcastle have beaten Southampton. But at the moment we are still clinging on, I believe, if I've got my maths right, to 6th place in the league. That may end before the end of the Newcastle-Southampton game. Right then.
It's now 2-1 Newcastle.
Now 2-1, yes. So I think we're still holding on for the moment, but it may not be for much longer. Right.
Yeah.
I was going to mention the Mustafi injury. We've actually already mentioned it. I believe he's out for a number of weeks. It will be interesting to see how we cope with that. But other than that, I think we can move on to predict. Oh, sorry, you were going to say something.
Interesting is one word for what
Yes, that's a very good point. We will keep our fingers crossed. Now, we are relatively fortunate that, yes, we've got that Man City game coming up at the start of November, but before that we have 5...
Right. Lots of time for lots of firework.
Yes. Fireworks night. Puns are plenty there.
Puns by the commentators.
Yeah. Well, we've got 5 games before that, which are, you would hope, should we say winnable, without committing ourselves to anything further. And it's time to start the predictions. Now, the Europa League is one competition where we are We have a 100% record. We're doing rather well in that. Well, let's start with that. Pete, as you're here, you'd like to go first. A line or two if you really want to, or less if you would prefer, on Red Star versus Arsenal. That game is on Thursday at 6 o'clock. And a prediction, please.
Yeah, well, I'm really quite enjoying this whole Europa League thing. It's quite strange and peculiar. But as I said, I thought we should have a bit of fun with it, and it has been fun, hasn't it? It's been great to see us just play whoever we fancy, basically, and for that group of players to actually really look to be enjoying it, whatever, and look to be coming together and having some fun and getting some good results. So I hope that the same thing will happen on Thursday, and I will go for quite an exciting 3-2 Arsenal.
3-2 Arsenal, right. Well, there we go. I'll put that in the old spreadsheet. Matt, I don't know what his thinking is. I don't think he was feeling particularly optimistic after we got these. He sent me these predictions just after the game yesterday, but he's still gone for a 2-0 Arsenal win. I'm going to go for a 2-1 Arsenal win on the basis, again, that Red Star are a unknown quantity to me in terms of their current players and all the rest of it. I must admit, I've forgotten to check how they're actually doing in the league. I think they were higher than. They got a result with Cologne, didn't they? They beat Cologne, if I remember rightly. So they are up. They're doing okay. So I'm going to go for 2-1. I'm going to go for a close Arsenal win. I'm sticking with the faith in terms of Arsenal actually winning, but I will go for the narrow one rather than a comprehensive one. Then we come to next Sunday, where we are away at Goodison Park playing Everton. It's a 1:30 kickoff. I'll go first here. I've gone with a 2-0 win to Arsenal. I don't know why. I don't know what my logic is there. I'm thinking that Everton are another team having their own problems at the moment, and perhaps if we can get an early goal after a decent performance in Europe, we might feel a bit enthused, a bit excited, and we might go for a comfortable 2-0 win. Matt's gone for 2-2. This is where his pessimism is starting to come in, I think. Although we mustn't forget he is leading this competition. We all got 0 points, I should say, for the Watford game because we all thought we'd win. So that's why there's no score update there. So Pete, what do you think for the Everton game?
I keep worrying about last season's away game to Everton and just how poor we were. But I think this is different, and I think Everton are worse than we are and really won't have got that. It could be that it's the same as last season, that it really turns things round for them, that they suddenly start playing, but I think Koeman's lost it personally already, and therefore I will go for a 2-1 Arsenal win.
2-1.
Yes, is that what you went for?
No, I've gone 2-0.
I'll go 2-1.
You go 2-1. All right, that's great. I've got that there. I will make a note of that. Just to go back one step, Red Star are second in the group in the Europa League, so it's a top of the table clash.
That's a big 4 points.
That's right. So we have a chance to extend a nice lead. If we could beat them, in both games, that might even qualify us for the next bid already. I can't do the maths off the top of my head while I'm trying to do this at the same time, but yeah, it will be nice to see if we can get a couple of wins, and then we'll be back next week. Hopefully, it'd be lovely if we could discuss a couple of wins next week. But that will depend on the Arsenal playing somewhat better than they did yesterday. All right, then we'll leave it there because I think we've covered everything pretty comprehensively. So, Pete, thank you very much for your company.
Thank you very much, Matt. It's been an absolute joy, and I shall just hope we have a better time next week.
Well, you know what happened? We had a couple of pods, so we had a couple of wins to discuss in each of the pods. So soon,
which
you missed. Yes, I don't want to cast aspersions, but we'll bear that in mind for next week. So yeah, unfortunately, it was bound to break at some point. It's slightly unexpected that it happened yesterday. Well, thank you, Pete, and thank you very much for listening, and we will speak to you next week. Take care. Bye bye.